The management wants to withdraw from motor racing. Withdraw. 60 years of motorsports history. Over just like that.
I love the history of motorsport, and Mercedes-Benz are part of that history. There's nobody larger than Mercedes-Benz.
With this victory, Caracciola wins the European Championship for the third time. First place, Juan Manuel Fangio. You don't become world champion just sitting behind the wheel, pressing the pedal down. No, you have to have grown up with cars. Even today, we have to say that they were simply good. Rudolf Caracciola is the current holder of several international speed records on Mercedes-Benz. You've taken up a job which you know is dangerous. You've got to realize that in advance. Either I'm a race car driver and live with it, or I can't take it anymore, and I have to stop immediately. So we had just fallen for racing, and death didn't frighten us. I'll keep driving. Nizza, 1899. 13 years after the invention of the automobile, a girl's name becomes the foundation of a legend.
Mercedes!
Mercedes Adrienne Ramona Manuela Jelinek, from whom came the name of the world-famous car brand. Her father, Emil Jelinek, registers in 1899 for a car race in Nizza under his daughter's name. From now on, all Daimler cars brought to the starting line by Jelinek start under the Mercedes name. The first victories are achieved, and in 1901, the 35-horsepower model is dominating the racing scene. The name Mercedes has become famous overnight. From 1902 on, the successor to the 35-horsepower Mercedes is called Simplex. This 28-horsepower Simplex from 1904 thrills the owner Dieter Dressel again and again. It's not just that the Mercedes Simplex models represent the very first Mercedes. They also stand for the first example of a modern car as it is understood today. It has a low-lying chassis in order to get a low center of gravity. The engine is built in low as well, for the same purpose, and is also water-cooled. Rear-wheel drive, there's a manual transmission with 4 forward gears and a reverse gear. All these features can be found in a modern car as well. That's why this car is such a milestone. The Mercedes Simplex, a successful race car as well, starting in 1903 at the Gordon Bennett Cup in Ireland. Every important European car nation competed in this race. Germany takes the 60-horsepower Simplex after having lost the originally chosen 90-horsepower car in a fire at the Cannstatt factory. Belgian driver Camille Janazzi sensationally wins the 1903 Gordon Bennett Cup in a Mercedes Simplex. The Swabian car brand stays closely linked to racing in the following years. The men from Stuttgart celebrate their hitherto biggest success in 1914 in Lyon, winning the French Grand Prix, phenomenally taking the first 3 places. The original victorious car from back then found a new home far away from its former site of success. It's now driving in Oregon, where former Senator George Wingard rebuilt the Grand Prix car from 1914. July 4th, 1914. Company driver Christian Lautenschlager is triumphant in this very Mercedes. Second and third place also go to Mercedes. This triple victory is for the time being the pinnacle in Mercedes motorsports history. This comes as no surprise to the American collector, as the Grand Prix car's technology seems to have been just too superior at the time.
The Mercedes picked out little points of edges they needed to pick out to win, because they were bound and determined to win this race.
And George Wingard is not just marveling about the technology. The driver's performance, too, should not be underestimated.
You really don't understand these cars until you know the history, and then you understand what it's like to sit in a car like this for 7 hours. It's very humble experience.
The First World War and inflation in the 1920s forced Mercedes to pause, at least for the time being. 1926. Again, Mercedes at the starting line of a Grand Prix. To a young German, the long-sought opportunity. Are you ready? Yeah, all good. At Berlin's Avus track, a rising star, the greatest driver of the 1920s and 30s, is debuting on this beautiful summer day. His name, Rudolf Caracciola. After some difficulties at the start, this young gun impresses everybody with his talent, especially driving in the rain. Inexplicably, the rain did not impede Rudolf Caracciola much, and he wins the Grand Prix. Born in Remagen in 1901, the son of a hotelier, is fascinated by cars from a young age on. As a kid, he already has but one dream. I believe that everyone can achieve what they want. I also believe that everyone who feels a strong enough urge for a certain occupation will at some point work in that profession. I wanted to be a race car driver ever since my 14th birthday. His dedication combined with intelligence and physical strength is legendary. The success story of Caracciola and Mercedes-Benz continues in the following years, with him reaching the Olymp of motorsports in the S, SS, and SSK models. The SS race car from 1928 is the second of the legendary supercharged models. 7.1-liter, 180 horsepower. The numbers speak for themselves. This car had but one goal: winning. The SS model's harmonious relationship between technology and driver makes this a superlative vehicle in 1928. Collector Franz Mark is especially fascinated by the engineering from back then. The car is a marvel in its entirety. What they've built in the late 20s was so well thought that you simply can't improve anything. It is as it is, and it remains as it is. This roaring supercharger frightened the competition. So in 1929 in Ireland, during this golden age of motor racing, the Tourist Trophy is revived. For some time now, Caracciola is no longer an outsider, especially not when it's raining. It's raining, and everybody is driving slowly except Caracciola. The restrained German quickly becomes the master of driving in the rain. Thus, Rudi Caracciola gets his TT win and is now one of the up-and-coming stars. Apart from the SS model, the SSK with a shortened wheelbase gets raced too. This car is thought to be the most spectacular of the six-cylinder supercharged models. Collector Everett Laumann can hardly conceal just how proud he is when speaking of his SSK.
First of all, it's a very important car. There are only a few are made in the years 29, and this is one which is completely original. Other thing which is so wonderful, that this car is never been spoiled. No, it is exactly the SSK of 1929.
Usually this one-off is kept in its own museum in The Hague. Yet the Dutchman drives his SSK himself at demanding rallies like the Mille Miglia.
The engine has such a wonderful power. It was the top of the top. You could not get a better car than an SSK. I love it. I love to drive it.
The result of the merger of Benz and Daimler Motorengesellschaft, the Mercedes-Benz brand is the benchmark with regard to technology, design, and innovation at the end of the 1920s. The culmination for now, the SSK. This last letter stands for the shortened wheelbase Kurz in German of this majestic sports car. Caracciola continues to win with the Super Sport Kurz. At the beginning of the 1930s, economic disaster strikes. The Great Depression erases many jobs, and Mercedes-Benz discontinues racing. That was, at least temporarily, the end of my career as a German race car driver. I went to Alfa Romeo, but I knew it was only a guest appearance. I often sat for long talks with my friend Neubauer. We made plans, talked of new race cars, bigger, stronger, faster, and more beautiful than any race car prior. But those were just dreams. After 3 years, Mercedes-Benz is back at the racetracks. The 1934 Eifelrennen is the ideal stage to showcase the newly developed car. Driver Manfred von Brauchitsch is supposed to turn the comeback into a victory. One day before the race, however, some problems occur. We're not allowed to start. The whole preparation for nothing? The new racing formula allows for a maximum weight of 750 kilograms. At the weighing, the organizers find the car to be too heavy by 1 kilogram. Come on, you can still come up with something. One of your famous tricks. Otherwise, we're the ones who are painted stupid in the end. The legend of sanding down the white paint supposedly gave birth to the Silver Arrows. The truthfulness of Alfred Neubauer's story cannot be verified. However, what is known, the era of the Silver Arrows is as legendary as it is unique in motor racing history. At the beginning of this time, the W25, the very first Mercedes-Benz Silver Arrow, starts on the 3rd of June, 1934 in the Eifel. Of course, I needed some time to get used to the fast and agile vehicle. The road holding was amazing. It was a completely new feeling to suddenly sit in the middle of the vehicle with the clutch between the legs. This meant that you had to change your driving technique completely. A dream debut with Manfred von Brauchitsch steering the Silver Arrow to victory in the Eifel. This win is the stepping stone to the building legend, which even 80 years later hasn't lost its draw. Gerd Straub, project manager for historic race cars, sits down where von Brauchitsch once celebrated his greatest success. Today, the 354 horsepower engine is demanding everything from the driver on Mercedes-Benz test track in Untertürkheim. To the left, it's rather warm as the exhaust pipe is running back next to the seat. You really feel that. It always keeps speed in order to keep the spark plugs clean. The 8-cylinder straight engine has 3.4 liters at the beginning. In its time, the W25 is a racing monster. After winning its first race in the Eifel, the Silver Arrows are held as the favorites for the next race. At the French Grand Prix, the public's focus is on the race cars from Germany, and especially on the return of a legend. Rudolf Caracciola is returning to Mercedes-Benz with this race. Racing manager Alfred Neubauer is rather skeptical, however. Crashing in an Alfa Romeo, Caracciola severely injured his leg, and neither is he in the best shape psychologically. After the second blow, the death of his wife, he broke down. Wanted to get rid of everything, stop everything. Was deeply depressed. I talked Charlie into going on a ski tour from which she never returned. I've lost my best friend. Despite his reservations, Neubauer has trust in the abilities of his protege, and Caracciola turns up in best form. Caracciola's Mercedes is now leading. Chiron is second. Suddenly, things change. The Silver Arrows aren't running as smoothly as they should. Not all seems to be well regarding the new cars. Von Brauchitsch falls behind because of problems with the supercharger. And the other cars break down too, a bitter disappointment for the Swabians. The German attack is averted. Rest. Gather all strength. I have a job to do. Next season, he's his old self again, topping it off with the win of the European Championship, which is held for the first time. It's a nearly indescribable feeling. Incomparable. You're back. That shadow is gone. You're racing again. Mercedes is 2 laps ahead of everybody else. Winner is the great German driver Rudi Caracciola. While Stuttgart is jubilant, the national competition from Zwickau goes on the attack. Auto Union wants to break the supremacy of the company from Swabia with the help of a newly developed car. High hopes are set on the exceptionally talented Bernd Rosemeyer, too. It's the beginning of a rivalry between 2 drivers, which will be closely followed by the racing community for the next 2 years. At the 1936 Eifelrennen, Rosemeyer shows for the first time that the balance of power is starting to shift. Caracciola retires from the race, and it becomes clear that Mercedes will be defeated. After the old hand breaks down, the new kid is suddenly ahead. It's young Bernd Rosemeyer, who used to race motorcycles. How he was able to throw the heavy Auto Union car through the Benz, it makes one fear and worry. I wonder, is it natural talent, courage, or recklessness? Rosemeyer's impressive performance ensures that he will be remembered as one of the all-time greats. From now on, he is famous as the master of the fog. For Mercedes, defeat after defeat. Auto Union takes everything with their young star, Bernd Rosemeyer. Mercedes-Benz stops all racing even before the end of the season, and at a press conference presents measures which are to be taken for the next season. Next question, please. What are you going to do now, Mr. Neubauer? We at Mercedes have come to the conclusion that the defeat of last year's can be traced to a simple design flaw. But I'm telling you, let the past be and let's look towards the future. We've hired a bright young man for our racing fleet. Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Rudolf Uhlenhaut. I'm an engineer. Management puts great faith in the talented 30-year-old and entrusts him with heading the racing division. During testing at the Nürburgring, Uhlenhaut tries to find the reasons for last year's botched season. It quickly becomes clear that a refined version of the W25 doesn't make much sense, and so he decides to begin from scratch. Major changes in the concept lead to the development of the W125. Completely new running gear, much stronger engine than the previous version. The W125 had a stronger frame, but it was not heavier. A new front axle, a new rear axle, and we were able to maintain the permitted weight of 750 kilos. Everybody is awaiting the matchup between Caracciola and Rosemeyer at the Tripoli Grand Prix. First lap, Caracciola is leading. Stuck and Rosemeyer chasing him. 7th lap, now Van Brauchitsch ahead of Caracciola. 15th lap, Rosemeyer leading in front of Van Brauchitsch and Fagioli. 20th lap, Lang leading ahead of Rosemeyer and Delius. But none of the favorites wins. Instead, a former mechanic is triumphant. Hermann Lang is the man to watch. He's not only an excellent race driver, he's also an excellent mechanic. He has an ear for the sound of an engine and a sixth sense for the machines. And he's always able to exactly assess the strengths and weaknesses of his opponents. At Vienna's Höhenstrassenrennen, Hermann Lang shows his mastery of hilly terrain. He pushes his Mercedes-Benz for this race with twin rear wheels beautifully through the turns, eventually gaining the best overall time of the day. The Großglockner serves as the setting for these spectacular hill climb races. Hermann Lang drives to a new course record with the W125. More than 70 years later, the car returns. Jochen Mass, former Formula One driver and winner at Le Mans, at the wheel. Racing history right in front of him. At the very least, I've got them on my mind, the drivers from back then, who were really driving fantastic races. And these hill climb races, now those were real races, and they gave everything absolutely amazing. I've been driving many hill climb races, and I know how dangerous these can be if you're driving at the limit. It's a gratifying experience to drive these cars, to think of these men back then who drove great races. And these cars were fantastic. The 125 went like nothing else, and won. With the picturesque Alpine setting in the background, the former touring car champion is pushing the 6-liter engine up the mountain, his feet constantly working the pedals. The curvy road demands full concentration even from an old hand like Maas. One mistake would have fatal consequences. Yet the 66-year-old knows the car like no one else. Car and driver are one. A symbiosis just like 80 years ago with Hermann Lang. Only then, under true racing conditions. After Hermann Lang's surprising success in Tripoli, the remainder of the 1937 season goes through as expected, with the ongoing match between Caracciola and Rosemeyer being the key theme. Caracciola and Mercedes-Benz want to regain the crown of the European motor racing scene at the German Grand Prix. Both top drivers and their cars are really driving in a league of their own. Till today, this duel is seen as one of the most exciting in motorsports history. 2 laps later and Rosemeyer is in the lead. Another 4 laps and his tire bursts and his hub shell is broken. Nuvolari on Alpha is third when a damaged tire slows him down. Caracciola is driving as masterfully as ever. This is Caracciola's 5th win at the German Grand Prix in a Mercedes. The European Championship again goes to Stuttgart, and the 2 German racing stables are competing on the German Autobahn as well. Speed records are equally part of it, as are Grand Prix victories. Rudolf Caracciola gets 5 class records and 1 world record in 1936, attaining a top speed of 372 kilometers per hour. No one has ever been that fast on a public road. The former record holder doesn't make it undamaged through the war. The once impressive body is in a bad state. An exact replica is best positioned to measure the aerodynamics in a wind tunnel for the first time, as that had played a key role in Caracciola's success. No better place for testing than Mercedes-Benz wind tunnel in Untertürkheim. Dr. Teddy Voll, head of aerodynamics, is impressed with the 80-year-old design.
The streamlined body is almost perfect.
The bulbous front allows for no turbulences, so the air is displaced nearly without any vortices to stream along the body and suddenly flow together at the stern. And there at the back is a very small transom in order for the flow to easily reunite and separate cleanly. The turbine starts rotating, and so does measuring the drag coefficient. Air flows over the body with speeds of up to 130 kilometers per hour. Without taking into account the missing radiator, the test results are there after a couple of minutes, astonishing even the expert. Sensationally low value, 0.168. This is extremely good. A value below 0.2 is a great engineering feat. So that being 80 years ago, congratulations. Ever more knowledge regarding aerodynamics lead to a superlative car in 1938. The W125 Rekordwagen. The timeless design is just a side effect. With the 12-cylinder engine and the streamlined body, the car should reach hitherto unknown dimensions. There's only one driver for this task. Rudolf Caracciola, acting European champion and the man for records. Last year, Rosemeyer broke his top speed from 1936, and he wants to regain the top on the Autobahn from Frankfurt to Darmstadt.
Rudi, es geht los.
We're starting. An average speed of 400 kilometers per hour has to be beaten, a speed where one mistake can be fatal.
Start!
Kilometer 1. Already with the first part and a speed of well over 430 kilometers per hour, Caracciola and his vehicle make a mark. If they can keep that on the return leg, that would be hard to beat, which his competitor Bernd Rosemeyer knows all too well. Kilometer 10. Done. That's the record. 432 kilometers per hour on average are to be beaten by Rosemeyer. However, the building breeze is concerning the organizers. Congratulations. Thank you. Have you guys called the Weather Bureau again? It'll be fine. Good luck, Bernd. Caracciola's record is unbroken till today. At kilometer 9, a gust takes the Auto Union car. Rosemeyer has no chance and is immediately dead. At the pinnacle of his career, his passion proves to be his undoing. Motor racing loses one of its greatest idols on this 28th of January.
Yeah.
He was the embodiment of youth and heroic courage. He took the greatest gamble and paid the highest price. We will always remember you, Rosemeyer. Bernd Rosemeyer is survived by his wife and child. Racing goes on, however. Brit Richard Seaman joined the Mercedes-Benz team last year. In the 1938 season, he's keen to go for it. The English gentleman finds his great love in Germany, Erika Popp, daughter of the BMW CEO. Together they buy a house on Lake Starnberg. In his pursuit of happiness, he even breaks with his conservative mother in London, who is appalled at her son starting for Nazi Germany. To Seaman, racing success is all that counts. Due to the changing of the formula for the 1938 season, Uhlenhaut and his team of engineers develop a new Silver Arrow. Cylinders, 3-liter engine displacement, and 484 horsepower, the W154. Clearly to be seen is the avant-garde aerodynamic design. The W154 can attain a top speed of more than 300 kilometers per hour. The driver is sitting between two tanks filled with highly inflammable fuel. Another reason why Gerd Straub doesn't push his car to the maximum potential at the test track. It makes sense not to think too hard about that. As fully fueled, you're sitting between 400 liters of methanol fuel. You can't see it. When it burns, it just gets warm. Difficult to imagine now that there were 20 of these vehicles at the starting line at the Nürburgring, fully loaded with fuel. Well, they were the heroes of their time. German Grand Prix 1938. This is Richard Seaman's chance to finally show that he is a full member of the team. He's battling it out with Manfred von Brauchitsch. Manfred von Brauchitsch is in the lead. Finally, it seems his biggest dream comes true, winning the German Grand Prix. 15th lap, Brauchitsch and Seaman in the pit lane. A routine job for the mechanics, but one of them makes a mistake. Then, unbelievable, Brauchitsch's car catches fire. Team manager Neubauer pulls Brauchitsch out of the car. Passing Brauchitsch's burning car, Seaman goes on to take the lead. After a moment, the crew manages to extinguish the fire. I keep driving. To the thundering applause of the crowds, Brauchitsch continues the race. Bad luck strikes again as Manfred von Brauchitsch's car slides into a ditch and he has to abandon the race. Seaman drives impeccably, winning, leading by 3 minutes. For the first time in 15 years, an Englishman has won an important Grand Prix race. Seaman manages to emerge from the shadow of the other drivers. This victory at the German Grand Prix is for the time being his professional high point. And privately, it's going rather well too, as he marries his great love Erika Popp in the winter of 1938. 1 year later, the famous Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps in eastern Belgium is virtually flooded. Immediately after the start, a group of silvery cars jumps ahead. First place, Müller in Auto Union, trailed by Seaman and Lang. Traditionally, the drivers are supported by their wives at important races like this one. Seaman in the lead. 12th lap. Auto Union is left behind due to an engine failure. So it is now an internal duel. Despite the rain, top speeds of up to 220 kilometers per hour are expected. 22nd lap. Neubauer is awaiting his two drivers to pass the pit lane. But only one Silver Arrow emerges out of the dense rain, Hermann Lang's. Seaman is nowhere to be seen. Where is he? The sad news reached the team after several minutes. Seaman had a grave accident. It is not yet clear just how badly injured the Brit is. In a blind left bend, a race official waved the yellow flag at me. Watch out, danger. And I immediately reduced speed. But I could not see straight away what had happened. But at the end of the bend, I saw that a racing car had crashed into a tree. And whilst driving past, I recognized Seaman. I will never forget this horrifying picture. The car was practically wrapped around the tree due to the massive impact. The tank had burst. Wedged in his seat was Seaman, amidst a blaze. Richard Seaman is brought to the next hospital immediately. He is in critical condition. Erika and Alfred Neubauer are waiting in front of room number 39 for hours now. The doctors are fighting for the Brit's life, but to no avail. I'm very sorry. Just 1 year of being together and Erika becomes a widow, being just 19 years old. The experienced team manager cannot fathom it either. He knows the dangers of motor racing like no one else. But this is the first time it hit one of his protégés. It's always the same old. I know it from thousands of races. I've experienced it over and over again on all race courses around the world. A driver takes the same bend 99 times, and at the 100th time, it all goes wrong. He wants to achieve a better race time. Accelerates a little bit more, loses control, and crashes fatally. Richard Seaman, the only casualty in the era of the pre-war Silver Arrows. Hermann Lang and his Mercedes-Benz Silver Arrow wins the race in Spa, becoming a celebrated but tragic hero. December 1938. Rudolf Uhlenhaut's design office is bustling with people. Just a few weeks ago, the board of directors decided to build a new race car, as the organizers of the Tripoli Grand Prix decided to use a new formula for the desert race in the Italian colony. Only cars with an engine displacement of no more than 1.5 liters are allowed to start in May 1939. Modify the W154? Impossible. A new development is needed. Many all-nighters and dozens of drawings later, the W165 is ready in April 1939 already. A technological masterpiece. Two cars are starting in Tripoli. The chosen pilots are Hermann Lang and Rudolf Caracciola. At the wheel of the smallest Silver Arrow ever built is Jochen Mass. 254 horsepower and an impressive 8,000 revolutions per minute can propel the W165 up to 270 kilometers per hour. These bare numbers speak for the impressive performance by the developers. But not only the engineers have Jochen Mass looked back misty-eyed. The former Formula One driver values especially the performance of the man sitting behind the wheel. The single most impressive thing is driving it over such a long time, driving it precisely. Bringing the car up to speed. At every turn, being on the inside and this and that. That's no mean feat. especially as these races were long, up to 5 hours, incredibly tough. Seen from now, I can't really fathom it.
In Retrospekt kaum nachvollziehbar, was die damals leisten.
Race day at the oasis of Melaha. 10,000s of spectators are coming. An unbelievable test lies ahead. 524 kilometers in 40 laps through Africa's heat and sand. Tensions are running high in the team as Caracciola and Hermann Lang had a heated argument the evening before. The experienced driver senses that the team management feels ever more confident about the capabilities of his internal rival. People don't know how much politicking is going on in the pit behind my back. Surely this was leaked by Brauchitsch and Caracciola scheming against Lang. What did they say again? They wouldn't allow a young gun, 10 years or younger, and thus risking more to hustle them aside, taking the best parts. Let's go. Rising star Hermann Lang is the flip side of the slow decline of the triple European champion. Not only was Lang allowed to slick in his tires during training, he also gets the car with the higher final drive ratio. Caracciola knows that the race strategy is clearly geared towards a win of the former mechanic. 28 red race cars from Alfa Romeo and Maserati, which both have ample experience building 1.5-liter cars versus the 2 silver Mercedes-Benz cars. What even the most die-hard optimists didn't dare predict becomes reality. The 2 Mercedes-Benz cars leave their competition far behind. Their high-revving engines with their Mahle light alloy pistons are working with the regularity and reliability of a clockwork. Hermann Lang crosses the finish line in a new record time, becoming winner of the fastest race in the world for the 3rd time in 3 years. Caracciola feels abandoned, especially by his team manager. Rudi has always been disciplined, but suddenly he's acting like a prima donna. I really don't know what's wrong with him. Is it his being jealous of Lang? The two didn't even take notice of each other. The young gun from Swabia shines for the remainder of the season, becoming European champion, only unofficially though. Only 5 cars participate at the Belgrade Grand Prix. 2 days after the invasion of Poland, it's clear to everyone that this is the last race for the time being. Nuvolari wins the last Grand Prix of the season. By now, the public's attention has moved away from the racetracks of Europe anyway. For 6 years, Europe descends into a war which alters the course of history. At the end, nothing but ruins, depression, and grief. The German economy lies in tatters. The Allied bombing campaigns have hit the Daimler-Benz factory especially hard. Rebuilding has absolute priority. Motor racing in Germany is pausing. Then, in 1951, the board of directors decides clandestinely to return to motor racing. After 2 sobering races in Argentina, Uhlenhaut and Neubauer are tasked to create a new team for the 1952 season. And after 13 years of absence, a new car, too, to prepare for the comeback. I'll never forget that day. Mercedes-Benz is taking up racing again after the war, and they got a new car. This day was like the beginning of a second youth to me. Built as a race car, it later becomes the icon of a whole company, the 300 SL. The legendary gull-wing doors make it a symbol of a new beginning. Stuttgart, Untertürkheim, Mercedes-Benz test track. A roar and the six-cylinder engine is running. Rudolf Uhrenhout used an extremely lightweight tubular space frame made from very thin steel tubes. Entering the car the usual way wasn't possible. Thus, the gull-wing doors were born. The W194, as it is internally called, isn't just about pure performance. The car is built for long-distance racing, and thus durability and reliability are the decisive factors. After becoming second in the Mille Miglia, the team from Stuttgart is setting its sights on a win in the next long-distance race. Every year, the small town of Le Mans in northwestern France gets crowded by 100,000 motorsports enthusiasts. The 24 Hours of Le Mans are one of the most prestigious races in the world. 3 Mercedes-Benz cars are at the start. One of the drivers is Hermann Lang, who has hoped to turn his experience into success. At Tertre Rouge, the 2 Cunninghams, steered by Fitch and Walters, are leading. And then come the Mercedes. Neubauer just gave his protege some new advice. The Mercedes caught up and is now attacking the quick Gordini. At halftime, the Mercedes-Benz cars are still in the middle. Lang is driving cautious. He knows how to spare the material. Many drivers don't finish at the 24 Hours of Le Mans due to technical difficulties. The former mechanic knows that. As the race draws to a close, Lang goes on to attack the leading Pierre Levet, who is leading by quite a margin. He's chasing him, but he's unlikely to gain 4 laps. Lang, however, will leave no chance unused. Now he tries to overtake and has passed. A good race car isn't enough. The drivers are equally important. Mercedes-Benz had excellent, really exceptional drivers. The strategy comes to fruition. Levet has broken down. Somewhere on the course, the Talbot had to stop. Neubauer is excited. The Mercedes cars seem to be the winners. Sensational. After 13 years of absence, Mercedes-Benz is back at the top. Neubauer is signaling. Place 2 goes to number 20, and for the first time, this magical 1 goes to Lang as he is passing the pit lane in the lead. Mercedes number 21 finishes first. An epic race comes to a close. Everybody gave his best. I want to play it safe, especially regarding the choice of the driver for the Grand Prix event. Who have we got here? Lang? He's a good driver, but in his 40s. So I got no one to really push the Silver Arrows. Yet I need a driver, and I already know who it's going to be. Here, written in my notebook, marked with red crosses. His name is Juan Manuel Fangio. When Mercedes-Benz returns to the pinnacle of motor racing in 1954 by hiring the Argentine, they get one of the best drivers of the time. Together with Fangio, they want to found the second era of the Silver Arrows. July 4th, French Grand Prix. The last seconds before the start. In the first row are Fangio, Kling, and Ascari. The new Silver Arrows are debuting in the still young Formula One. Right from the start, Kling, number 20, and Fangio, number 18, are leading. Now Fangio gets ahead of Kling. Behind them, Gonzalez and Hawthorne and the new Ferraris. Double victory for the newly developed Mercedes-Benz and a record average speed of 186.6 kilometers per hour. Mercedes-Benz is back, and impressively so. The debut of the new Silver Arrows shows parallels to the one from 1934, when Manfred von Brauchitsch won in the Eifel. This time, it's Juan Manuel Fangio who is exciting the crowds. The son of Italian immigrants has a special technical knowledge after having apprenticed as a mechanic. You don't become world champion just sitting behind the wheel pressing the pedal down. No, you have to have grown up with cars. To be honest, many drivers could have beaten me if they had been driving behind me. They lost because they passed me. Seen by many as the most beautiful race car of all time. The streamlined body, every curve hints at its unlimited speed potential. the W196R. To Gatstraub, the way back to the top is no coincidence. I think the people back then were simply good at what they were doing, using every possible way to build a race car, which was almost unbeatable in every respect. Be that the engine, the body, or whatever, it was a great team. Even today, we've got to say they were simply good. It's not just the work of the engineering team which impresses the motorsports expert. One man is equally responsible for the dominance of the new generation of Silver Arrows. Racing drivers are, of course, keen on driving as fast as possible. And there were, of course, differences. And what you hear from the stories, there was one who was really towering over everybody else. And that was Fangio. He was the fastest and yet had the lowest fuel consumption, had the lowest wear on the brakes, and all that came together. So he was the yardstick. And Fangio, too, knew whom to thank for his successes. Yeah, they were usually the fastest cars, naturally, as they were exceptionally strong. To win in them was easy. The only problem I can remember was 1954 in Silverstone, in the streamlined car. The body prevents the driver from steering the optimal line, especially in England, a disadvantage. What has already been feared before the race has now become a reality. The streamlined car isn't well suited to the track in Silverstone. Gonzalez wins ahead of Marimon and Fangio. The battle between Mercedes and Ferrari is 1-1. Due to this problem, the team had already developed a more traditional body for the W196R before the season started. But only mid-season the technicians give their go-ahead to actually use the car. Hans Hermann is then the youngest team member. Today, over 80, he's one of the last remaining witnesses of that time. The fascination remains till today. Depending on the course, Mercedes-Benz had several options, which of course is another advantage over the competition. The Monoposto was more agile. It was so simple to handle, lighter reaction, which of course was important on tracks like the Nürburgring with lots of turns. As team member, Hans Hermann got to witness why Fangio is one of the best drivers of all time. Fangio was a very sensitive person. He had this feeling to get everything out of him and the car to succeed. With one Manuel Fangio and those two different bodies, the Silver Arrows are thought to be the favorites for the World Championship, even in their first season. The new version with uncovered wheels is first used at the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. Everybody is looking at Fangio, who wins the race and is thus coming closer to his World Championship title. Team manager Alfred Neubauer in action. Mercedes is leading. Fangio wins the European Grand Prix. After Fangio winning the title in 1954, they head to the home country of the champion for the beginning of the 1955 season. In Argentina, everybody is counting on a win of their national hero. In grueling heat, many drivers abandon the race, but the Maestro keeps driving impeccably. The Autodromo is virtually exploding as he wins the legendary heat battle of Argentina.
Llegó Fangio, los primeros 9 puntos del Campeonato Mundial 1955 quedan así en manos del más grande volante de todas las épocas. El público lo aclama como la figura ya casi legendaria del automovilismo mundial.
My toughest race was that of 1955 in Argentina because of the unbearable heat. You know, the car's engines were at the front in those days, so all the heat blew towards the back when you drove. There were drivers who had to give up, collapsed. And I believe Mieres, another Argentinian, and I were the only ones who got through it without swapping. I felt just as bad as the others. Never, ever will I forget this race. As the excitement over the victory fades somewhat, the champion realizes just how much of a toll this victory took. His right leg is severely burned due to the enormous heat. That's another reason why this race is thought of as one of his greatest.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, señor. Gracias.
The wound doesn't hold back the Argentine's ambition, as Mercedes-Benz wants to win 2 titles this season. And the stable from Stuttgart is starting in sports car races again, too. Fitted with a 3-liter engine, the 300 SLR is supposed to perform in endurance races, such as the Mille Miglia and Le Mans. The sound of the 8-cylinder engine, incomparable. The Silver Arrow pilot Sterling Moss once said about the sound of the 300 SLR, "No other engine sounds so me." Obviously, the engine running speed was quite high for those times. The engine was brought up to 8,000 revolutions. And at that point, it can naturally get quite aggressive. And due to the long inlet manifold and relatively short exhaust with almost no muffler on it, it can sound pretty vicious. The engine of the 300 SLR is set up in such a way that it doesn't need special fuel, as opposed to a Formula One car. The car uses normal high-octane fuel. With a power of 310 horsepower, the Silver Arrow attains a maximum speed of 300 kilometers per hour. From my point of view, the car drives very well. It's a car which can be driven slowly and at top speed, as the achievements during those days show. But the car was the ultimate, also considering the tuning of the car. The maiden voyage takes place in northern Italy. Neubauer hired young Brit Sterling Moss to achieve the goals set. He starts with his co-driver Dennis Jenkinson at 7:22 from Brescia. After a few hours, even the last person realizes that he is witnessing one of the greatest performances in motor racing history. As Sterling Moss crosses the finish line after 10 hours, 7 minutes, and 48 seconds, a record unbroken till today. To understand just how great a performance this is, one needs some imagination, as a repeat seems impossible. Unbelievable to me, this performance, what Moss has shown here. If you've participated in the Mille Miglia, even just as a service driver, you're driving all day and get an average speed of 50 kilometers per hour, and he drove an average of nearly 160. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Le Mans is another stop for the 300 SLR. Mercedes-Benz is already on a farewell tour to the international motor racing scene. The board of directors has clandestinely decided to discontinue racing. Neubauer hires Frenchman Pierre Levesque specifically for this race, aside from his core team. 3 years ago, he left a lasting impression on the team manager with his solo drive on this course. The race becomes a private battle between Fangio and Mike Hawthorne in Jaguar. The spectators are watching dangerously close, a crucial part of the biggest catastrophe in motorsports. The two are trading the leading position, all the while overtaking the competition. Shortly after 6 p.m., frenzied activity in the pit lane as changes are ahead. 5 cars are approaching the lane. Among them, the leaders and Pierre Levesque. Suddenly, a loud bang, followed by a gigantic explosion. The people in the stands and in the pit lane are mortified. Sheer horror. What happened? A race car shot into the crowd with over 200 kilometers per hour. It's Pierre Levesque's Silver Arrow. A car in front of him pulls out. Levesque has no time to react. The car in front of him becomes a ramp. Over 80 people lose their lives that day, Levesque among them. The catastrophe of Le Mans changes motor racing. The biggest tragedy of motor racing. Even the toughest drivers couldn't deal with the shock. Fangio was practically hiding in the pits. I had to pull myself together. Couldn't show my feelings. Mercedes-Benz pulls all cars from the race out of respect for the victims. Mike Hawthorne wins, but that's just an aside. October 16th, 1955, the last race of the season. The legendary Targa Florio through Sicily. It's the decisive race of the year for the Sports Car Championship, which is marginally led by Ferrari. The team from Stuttgart needs a perfect race. Sterling Moss wins again. Fangio becomes second. Another double victory for the Silver Arrows. And after winning the World Championship in the Formula One, it's the second title this season. I'm still in a daze from the victory party. And it's when I come back to my Italian flat that I see a letter on my desk from Mercedes. The management wants to withdraw from motor racing. Withdraw. 60 years of motorsports history. Over just like that? This retreat from racing is also the death of a car, which could never show that it belongs among the legendary Silver Arrows. The 300 SLR was supposed to chase titles in the 1956 season as a coupe, a car which became a legend despite never having raced. Michael Bock, director of Mercedes-Benz Classic, can only come up with superlatives for this so-called Uhlenhaut coupe. It's supersonic, gigantic, super sport. To most people at that time, when this machine was passing at 290 kilometers per hour, that must have been an experience from another world. The car is named after racing car expert Rudolf Uhlenhaut, who used this special SLR as his company car. To Michael Bock, the Uhlenhaut Coupe stands also symbolically for the whole dominance of the Silver Arrows. This car is the pinnacle of the racing department of the 30s and 50s. Over 2 decades of dominating motor racing in Europe, due to their attitude, their engineering genius, and also their pragmatism. That was the playing field of Rudolf Uhlenhaut and also of Alfred Neubauer. The story of the Silver Arrows, shaped by the men who were accompanying them. Rudolf Caracciola, racing icon of the 20s and 30s. He's the most successful Silver Arrow pilot. After a grave accident in Bern in 1952, he has to retire from racing. 7 years later, he dies in Kassel. His contemporaries pay their tribute to him in Untertürkheim. Manfred von Brauchitsch. He's winning the first race ever in which a Silver Arrow had participated makes him a legend. Famous for his volatile temper and his spectacular driving style. After the war, he doesn't manage to get his career started again. He dies in 2003. Richard Seaman. As a Brit, he's leaning against the political tide. Not even 2 years lasts his private and professional pursuit of happiness. He bets everything and loses. Juan Manuel Fangio. After 5 World Championship titles, he retires from racing. He stays close to Mercedes-Benz. When I stopped racing, they made me the president of Mercedes-Benz in Argentina. Me, a boy from a small town. To this day, he's seen as one of the best drivers of all time. He dies in 1995 in his home country. Hermann Lang drove his last race for Mercedes-Benz in 1954. He once ended Caraccio's dominance. His relationship to his former competitor remained tense even after the war. Hermann Lang dies in 1987 in Bad Cannstatt. Rudolf Uhlenhaut, the silent genius of the racing department, an excellent technician at the wheel, nearly as fast as the fastest Silver Arrow pilots. He dies in 1989. Alfred Neubauer, the legendary team manager. No one shaped this era of motor racing more than the team manager. He lived through all the ups and downs of the Silver Arrow era. After the discontinuation of racing activities, he acts as a historian of racing history until he dies in 1980. Accelerate! They were the heroes behind the wheels of legendary cars, which had an importance far beyond motor racing. The Silver Arrows, the historic pinnacle of a unique success story.